I'll be honest, I haven't held a newborn until about 3 weeks ago. I had a tiny nephew that was born at the very beginning of the month. And because I have another nephew, but he was born about 3 weeks into the pandemic, and so I didn't meet him until he was already a toddler. And so this was the very first time I held a 5.5 pound baby, which is, I understand small for babies. I don't know a whole lot about babies, obviously, but I was shocked at how little Jake is. I'll be seeing him a little later tonight. And it made Advent feel really different this year. You know, we know the story. We know that Jesus comes to us as a newborn baby, but unless you've held one, you don't really know what that means. At least that's the case for me. But when I got to meet him a couple of weeks ago and held his precious life in my hands and cuddled him against my chest, suddenly I understood the Christmas story in a way I never have. We talk so much about Christ as a ruler, Christ as the king. Even if we follow the path that Jesus has laid out for him, we only think of Jesus as an adult. Even the Christ candle names lighting the path that he's laid out before us, thinking of his teachings as they will manifest. When we think of Jesus, most often we think of him between the ages of 30 and 33, which I have a lot more understanding of because I'm 32, right smack dab in the middle of that right now. So I'm like, okay, I get people in their 30s. I don't get a baby that's 3 days old. And it turns our understanding of the incarnation on its head. So often we talk about God being with us, as the prophet Isaiah talked about, as this ruler who will break the rods of oppression, who will burn all of the things that have been made bloody and make everything new, who will save us from all of the pain that is in this world. And I am so hungry for that Messiah. Maya Angelou's wishes for this world are so poignant in these days which are war-torn, these days which are full of oppression. Throughout all of these songs, we sing about that rod being broken, about the slave being our brother, about finding God amidst the most vulnerable. And we understand that from a systemic framework, right? We know that there is racism, that there is a genocide going on right now in this moment. We understand homophobia and transphobia. We understand sexism. We understand the ways that these things operate in our world. It's a different type of vulnerability when you talk about a newborn. And so before the rod breaks, before the teachings, before all of the things that made Jesus who he was, who we still follow, as the call to worship said, his voice still echoes through the ages. And isn't that true? Or else we wouldn't be sitting here. Before all of that, God is an infant. God is 5.5 pounds. And what does that teach us? First and foremost, it flips that word vulnerability on its head a little bit. I feel really vulnerable when I'm standing up here in front of you telling you that I've never held a newborn before. I feel really vulnerable when we lean in and we tell each other the things that are hurting in our lives. We feel really vulnerable when we talk about our joy. We feel really vulnerable at this time of year, maybe, when there are pretty lights, but there's also grief. So the first thing, before all of the teaching which made Jesus who he was, it was about being cared for. My little nephew, Jake, can't lift his head. He doesn't know he has hands. He will sometimes, he's got razor sharp nails. Sometimes he'll even scratch himself because he's flailing. And so he has to be swaddled. He has to be held. He has to be fed. He has to have his head supported. He has to be held just right. Oh, I didn't realize it, but I'm hungry for that Messiah too. The one who asks to be held. The one who cries when he's hungry. The one who doesn't know he has hands. It's not about the doing. Maybe first and foremost, being saved is about receiving. We talk about how much more blessed it is to give than to receive. That's the kind of moral of Christmas, right? It's not about what you get. And of course, not in a materialistic sense, right? But actually, what if the moral of Christmas is actually about receiving? About learning to be held well. About not just practicing love and joy and peace and hope outwardly, but to receive those gifts inwardly. If we are to take the story of the incarnation seriously, receiving comes first, well before acting. So I don't know about you, but this Christmas is tender for me. With everything going on in the world, everything going on in each of our personal lives, I don't think I know one person who isn't going through it with a capital G, capital T, capital I right now. And we talk about the generosity of Christmas, and yes, it is blessed to give. And also, I know so many people who are pouring out of empty cups tonight. So we talk about that Christ light, the Christ candle as guiding our path forward. And yes, that is true. Lent's starting in 6 weeks. We'll talk about Jesus' ministry then. But tonight, the practice is to tend the tender holy. And beloveds, the tender holy is you. And so may you receive the love. May you receive the hope. May you receive the joy. May you receive the peace. May it be a balm for our souls that kindles that light. The candle is also a fragile thing. And so may we hang on to it. May we tend it. May we make room for it. And may you be held in a deeply intimate, personal way, like a 5.5-pound baby. Amen.